Imagine an empire so old, so shrouded in myth, that even historians couldn't agree if it ever existed. A great flood. A miraculous engineer. A dynasty of kings said to rule before written history began. But what if I told you that in the last 50 years, archaeologists may have found its ruins buried deep beneath modern China? Welcome to the enigma of the Xia Dynasty, China's first and perhaps most mysterious dynasty. Was it real? Or was it just a story crafted to legitimize the empires that followed? For centuries, Chinese historians spoke of a dynasty that came before all others. A dynasty founded by Yu the Great, a man said to have tamed floods with his bare hands and ushered in the age of kings. But here's the twist: the Xia dynasty, despite being written into the ancient chronicles, left behind no written records. No inscriptions. No royal decrees. Not even a single confirmed tomb. So, is the Xia just a myth? A political invention used by later rulers to justify their power? Or did an entire civilization rise, rule, and vanish before history even began recording itself? In today's episode, we'll explore the legendary tales of the Xia dynasty, the story of Yu the Great and the Great Flood, why some historians call Xia a fabrication, the mysterious Erlitou culture, and its possible connection to Xia, and finally, the debate that still divides scholars to this day: did the Xia dynasty really exist? Or was it the greatest ghost story in Chinese history? Long before the first emperor of China sat on the throne. Long before the Great Wall, the Silk Road, or the invention of paper. There was Xia, the first dynasty of ancient China. Or so the legends say. The first documented reference to the Xia dynasty appears in the Shu Jing, or the Book of Documents, one of China's 5 classics, traditionally attributed to Confucius himself. The text describes a line of kings that ruled after the Great Flood, beginning with Yu the Great, followed by his son Qi, and on through 17 generations of rulers. But here's what's strange: these records were written centuries after the Xia supposedly existed. We're talking about oral legends, passed down for hundreds of years before they were ever inked on bamboo slips. And in those legends, things get mythical. Central to Xia's origin story is the Great Flood. Not unlike the biblical flood in Genesis or Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh. The Yellow River overflowed, devastating the land. Entire communities were swept away. Crops drowned. Famine spread. Then came a man named Gun, sent by the Emperor of Heaven to stop the waters. But Gun failed. He was executed, and his son, Yu, was given the impossible task: control the flood, or perish trying. For 13 years, Yu the Great toiled, carving channels, digging canals, and redirecting rivers. Unlike his father, who tried to block the water, Yu understood it had to be guided, not resisted. His success was so monumental that the people crowned him king, marking the supposed beginning of the Xia dynasty. Yu's story is so central to Chinese identity that later dynasties upheld him as a model of virtue, wisdom, and perseverance. He was the ideal ruler, the original engineer, the first environmentalist, the man who saved China before it was even China. According to the chronicles, Yu's dynasty lasted for over 400 years, with a long line of kings who ruled the Central Plains. But like all dynasties, Xia's reign ended, not in glory, but in decay and corruption. The final king, Jie, is depicted as a tyrant, cruel, indulgent, and oblivious to his people's suffering. His downfall paved the way for the Shang dynasty, which overthrew Xia and established its own rule around 1600 BCE. And that's where the records stop. No Xia tombs. No written decrees. No monuments. Just stories, passed down generation after generation. But that raises the ultimate question. If Xia ruled for over 4 centuries, why is there no hard evidence they ever existed? If the Xia dynasty is the mythic foundation of ancient China, then Yu the Great is its beating heart. Yu's tale begins not in a palace, but in the muddy floodplains of the Yellow River. where raging waters swallowed entire villages, turned farmlands to swamps, and threatened the very existence of early Chinese civilization. Legend says you traveled thousands of miles on foot, studying the rivers, watching the land. He refused to go home for over a decade, even when his son was born, because his duty to the people came first. And when he finished, the flood receded. The lands dried. Order was restored. And the people, grateful and awed, offered him a crown. In that moment, a civil engineer became a king, and the Xia Dynasty, so the story goes, was born. But Yu's story doesn't stop at heroism. Some versions say he was descended from dragons. Others say he could change shape, and that magical creatures helped him carve out the waterways. He was, at once, man and myth, blending Confucian ideals of virtue with Taoist elements of divine transformation. But herein lies the mystery, if Yu was such a towering figure in history. Why are there no monuments to his reign? Why no inscriptions, no official records, no royal seal? Scholars argue that Yu the Great may not have been a real man at all, but rather, a symbol, crafted over centuries. His story represents the perfect Confucian ruler. He puts duty above family. He works for the people, not for wealth. He gains power not by conquest, but through virtue. In other words, Yu is what every later emperor wished they could claim to be. The Han Dynasty, for instance, looked back on Yu with reverence, painting him as the ancient father of Chinese civilization. The Zhou, who overthrew the Shang, also invoked Yu's legacy to legitimize their mandate of heaven. By the time Confucius was teaching in the 5th century BCE, Yu wasn't just a king, he was a founding myth, baked into the DNA of Chinese identity. Still, even myths leave traces. In 2007, Chinese scientists discovered evidence of a massive prehistoric flood in the Jishur Gorge of the Upper Yellow River, right around the time Yu is said to have lived. Radiocarbon dating suggested the event occurred around 1900 BCE, within the timeline often linked to Xia. Could this flood have been the seed of the Yu legend? Could a skilled leader, perhaps even a real person named Yu, have emerged during that crisis and been mythologized over time? We may never know for sure. But the flood's existence gave new life to a debate that had raged for centuries. Unlike Egypt's pharaohs or Mesopotamia's kings, China's Xia dynasty left no inscriptions. No steles. No names carved in stone. All we have is Yu's legend, and a few references written down centuries later, by people who never saw his face. But there's a twist. Starting in the 20th century, archaeologists uncovered ruins. Entire cities. Sophisticated palaces. Advanced bronze tools. And suddenly, the Xia no longer felt impossible. In the next chapter, we explore the Erlitou culture, a mysterious civilization discovered in central China. A culture that could finally bridge the gap between myth and evidence. But is Erlitou truly the Xia, or just a coincidence buried in the dust? For over 2,000 years, the Xia dynasty was accepted as truth. But here's the catch, there was no physical proof it ever existed. The Xia are said to have ruled for nearly 500 years. Yet unlike their successors, the Shang, whose existence is backed by inscriptions on oracle bones, bronze vessels, and royal tombs, the Xia left behind no such trace. No royal decrees. No city names. No contemporary mentions. Just silence. This silence made many scholars, both inside and outside China, deeply suspicious. After all, can a dynasty truly exist if no one wrote about it at the time? In the early 20th century, as archaeology advanced in China, a new generation of Chinese scholars began to question the official timeline. One of the most vocal was Gu Zhigang, the founder of the doubting antiquity school. His argument? That the Xia dynasty was fabricated, inserted retroactively into Chinese history by later rulers like the Zhou, who needed to justify their own claim to power. To Gu, Xia wasn't a real dynasty. It was a mythical prequel, written to give China's ruling elite a divine backstory. A tool of ideological control masquerading as ancient history. The theory gained traction because it made political sense. The Xia Dynasty, who claimed to succeed the Shang, also claimed the mandate of heaven, a divine right to rule. But that idea needed a pattern. A virtuous ruler rises. His descendants become corrupt. Heaven revokes the mandate. So what better way to justify their rule than to say the same had happened before, to the Xia? The Book of Documents, the main source about Xia, is filled with moral tales. It reads less like a history, and more like a lesson in ethics. To skeptics, this wasn't evidence of Xia's truth, but a red flag. Many Western historians remained cautious too. Without inscriptions, without artifacts clearly marked Xia, there was simply no way to verify the dynasty's existence. The prevailing view became, Xia may have been a tribal confederation, or an elite family group, or just a story invented later. And that left the Xia in historical limbo, too old to be confirmed, too detailed to be dismissed. In the 1950s, archaeologists digging in Hunan province uncovered something strange. A large city, with palaces, bronze smelting areas, burial sites. All of it dating back to roughly the same period when the Xia were said to have ruled. A culture that had no written name. So it was given one, Erlitou. For centuries, the Xia dynasty was a phantom, present in legend, but absent from the earth. Until one day, something surfaced. In 1959, archaeologists excavating the Erlitou Basin in Hunan province uncovered the remains of an ancient city. At first, it seemed like just another Bronze Age settlement. But as they dug deeper, they realized. The city covered over 300 hectares, huge for the era. There were palatial foundations, laid out with astonishing symmetry. Bronze workshops, ritual platforms, grave goods, all showing signs of a centralized elite class. They named the site Erlitou, after a nearby village. And here's the kicker, radiocarbon dating placed it at 1900 to 1500 BCE, exactly the timeframe traditionally given for the Xia dynasty. The Erlitou settlement was not some tribal camp, it was a planned city. Its layout included a central palace complex surrounded by workshops and residential areas. Carefully divided zones. Suggesting social hierarchy. Wide roads and water drainage systems. In the center stood two massive palace foundations, unlike anything seen in earlier cultures. This was a society with administration, engineering, and ritual sophistication. Could this, finally be the physical remains of the Xia? Among the most striking discoveries were bronze tools, weapons, and jade ornaments, all associated with elite classes in ancient China. Some items bore dragon motifs, an image linked with Yu the Great and dynastic rule. Also found were ritual vessels, evidence of ancestor worship, and a state cult. The implication? This was not just a large settlement. This was a capital, possibly even the seat of a dynasty. So how does Erlitou align with known dynasties? Longshan, pre-Erlitou, 3000, 1900 BCE Late Neolithic, no evidence of state structure. Erlitou 1900, 1500 BCE no written name. Strong urban state Shang 1600, 1046 BCE first confirmed dynasty with written records. Erlitou exists before the Shang. After the Neolithic tribes. And precisely during the window where the Xia was said to rule. Still, not all historians are convinced. The name Xia doesn't appear at Erlitou. No inscriptions, no seals, no written confirmation. To skeptics, Erlitou might be a proto-Shang city, or even an independent culture that was absorbed by later dynasties. To believers, however, Erlitou is the smoking gun. The moment where myth and archaeology finally shake hands. But if Erlitou was Xia, why didn't they leave written records? And why do scholars still argue over its identity 60 years after its discovery? In most stories, a discovery ends the mystery. But in the case of Erlitou, it only deepened the divide. Let's be clear, there is no single piece of evidence at Erlitou that says, this is Xia. No engraved dynasty names. No dates. No royal inscriptions. So the core question remains, are we discovering a nameless culture, or finally standing on the bones of the Xia dynasty? Among scholars, two main camps have emerged. These researchers believe Erlitou is Xia, or at least a major part of it. They point to the timing, aligned almost perfectly with Xia's traditional dates. The centralized structure and Bronze Age culture. The geographic location, the same central plains where Xia was said to rule. They argue that lack of writing doesn't mean absence of identity. After all, not all early civilizations left written records. Just because we don't see the name Xia doesn't mean it wasn't Xia. Names get lost, cities survive. Chinese historian Lu Lihong others are more cautious. They say there is no direct textual bridge between Xia and Erlitou. It's possible Erlitou was a cultural ancestor to Shang, but not Xia itself. And that the whole Xia narrative may have been retroactively projected onto Erlitou by modern politics or national pride. Some even argue that calling Erlitou Xia violates archaeological standards, because it turns an unproven hypothesis into state-backed truth. Naming Erlitou Xia is like naming Troy based on Homer alone, a poetic guess, not a scientific fact. Professor Sarah Allen, Dartmouth College. The debate isn't just academic, it's deeply political. Since the 1990s, the Chinese government has funded major projects to anchor the Xia dynasty into the national historical narrative. The 2000 Xiashangzhou Chronology Project aimed to settle once and for all the historical timeline, placing Erlitou as Xia's capital. But critics argued that the project was driven more by cultural pride than objective evidence. They feared that archaeology was being used to legitimize a national origin myth, rather than explore the truth. So here's the riddle. If Erlitou looks like a state, if it fits the time and the place, if it shows signs of elite rule, ritual worship, and centralized planning, but it doesn't name itself Xia, is it still Xia? And do we believe in Xia because of what we've found? Or because we've always believed in it? Whether the Xia dynasty was real or not, there's no question that it has shaped China's identity for over 2,000 years. Every civilization has its origin story. Rome had Romulus and Remus. The Jews had Abraham and Moses. The Greeks had the Olympian gods and Titanomachy. For China, that story is the Xia dynasty, a tale of divine mandate, environmental conquest, and moral virtue. Yu the Great isn't just a figure of history, he's a symbol. A representation of righteous leadership, order from chaos, harmony between man and nature. During the Zhou and Han dynasties, scholars like Confucius and Mencius promoted the story of Yu and the Xia to teach moral lessons. It wasn't about dates or dynastic lines, it was about virtue. A king who puts the people first, a man who earned power through action, not inheritance. Yu became the ideal ruler, the type emperors should emulate, and the people should respect. In this way, the Xia served a purpose, not as history, but as philosophical architecture. Fast forward to the 20th and 21st centuries, and the Xia still matters. In the 1990s, as China rose on the global stage, there was a growing movement to reassert China's civilizational continuity. Projects like the Xiashangzhou Chronology Project were launched not just to explore the past, but to own it. The Xia dynasty became more than a historical question, it became a point of pride, a cultural anchor, and a political tool. State museums proudly exhibit Erlitou artifacts as Xia-era relics. Schoolbooks describe Yu the Great as a historical hero. And entire festivals commemorate events from a dynasty that still hasn't been definitively proven to exist. You might ask, if we can't prove Xia was real, why do we keep telling its story? Because sometimes, a story doesn't need to be proven to be true in impact. The Xia Dynasty, real or not, has shaped how rulers rule, how people believe, and how nations see themselves. It's not just an ancient ghost story. It's a living mythology, still breathing through the identity of a nation. For over 4,000 years, the Xia Dynasty has lingered in the shadows of Chinese history. A dynasty without inscriptions. A king who tamed the waters but left no throne. A civilization that may have ruled before history itself began keeping records. We've explored the ancient legends of Yu the Great, the lack of evidence that sparked generations of skepticism, the archaeological wonder of Erlitou, and the fierce debate that still rages over what it all means. What we're left with is a paradox. The Xia Dynasty might have existed. It might have been a story created to give meaning. Or it might live in that strange space between fact and fiction, where truth is not what happened, but what people believed happened. But here's the thing, the search for the Xia is not just about the past. It's about who we are now. In every culture, we tell stories of golden ages, of wise kings, fallen empires, and ancient orders lost to time. The Xia is China's story. A myth, maybe. A memory, maybe. But undeniably, a mirror. A mirror that reflects our need to belong to something bigger than ourselves. To trace our roots back through mud and time. To find meaning, even where there are no names left. That's the wrong question. The better question might be, why do we still need it to be real? Because in the end, whether Xia ruled the land, or simply rules the imagination, its story is still being written. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all, is why we're still trying to finish it. You've just taken a journey into one of the oldest unsolved mysteries in history, a tale of floods, kings, buried cities, and questions that refuse to die. If this story made you wonder, if it stirred something deeper about where we come from and what we choose to believe, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Mystery Lore Archive, where we explore the strange, the forgotten, and the stories history tried to bury. Drop your theory in the comments. Do you believe the Xia Dynasty was real, or was it the most powerful myth China ever created? And if you think this mystery was ancient, wait until you hear about the city that disappeared overnight, and left nothing but stone faces staring at the sea. That story is coming soon.